This particular passage is a bit challenging. In fact, when I was reading it, I found that I did have to go back and refocus on a few words and sentences because I tended to keep losing track. When it comes to the questions are not particularly difficult, but I definitely thought that they were a bit time consuming. So if you did solve this passage in the exam, at the end of it, you might have felt that you lost a little more time than you intended to. At the same time, if I had to say out of 4 questions, how many could be realistically targeted, I would say that 3 questions possibly could be gotten right from this passage. But as I said earlier, they would take time to solve. Let's first try to understand the passage. We're going to go a little bit slowly. Instead of reading it, I'm just going to try and paraphrase the text for the most part and use examples wherever required. So when I started reading it, the topic is pretty clear. It talks about the critical theory of technology. When we say critical theory of technology, the word critical could have 2 meanings. One is that it is criticizing technology or pointing out disadvantages. The other way of looking at it is that it is an evaluation or an analysis of technology or its impact. And it is the second meaning that we are really going to focus on. So we're not saying technology is bad in this theory. We're actually looking at what impact technology has. So what does this theory say? It says that advances in the formal claims of human rights take center stage, whereas in the background, centralization of powerful public institutions and private organizations imposes an authoritarian social order. So on the one hand, we are clamoring for individual rights. We are trying to say that people should have certain rights and freedoms. But while we are focusing on this, in the background, a completely different process is going on. In the background, these organizations and institutions are imposing a pretty tyrannical social order. So when we say authoritarian social order, it means that it is being imposed top down and there is very little room for dissent. So on the whole, we are talking about the impact of technology, but so far we've not really said how technology is related to imposing this particular social order. So the argument and the topic simply will relate to technology and its impact. In this case, the argument being made is pretty general. All that we are saying is that according to the critical theory of technology, while formal claims of human rights are gaining importance or prominence, we may fail to notice what is going on in the background, which is that certain organizations or institutions are imposing an authoritarian social order. Now let's take a look at paragraph 2. Perhaps this argument will be developed further. Now we are talking about Marx. Now Marx is Karl Marx, whom you might associate with the Communist Manifesto if you're familiar with that term. So Marx attributed this trajectory to the capitalist rationalization of production. Of course, Marx being Marx is going to attribute everything to capitalism. So according to Marx, this path that we talked about in the first paragraph, this imposition of a tyrannical social order, is related to the capitalist rationalization of production. Now, we would need to understand what rationalization of production is. So the system of capitalism tries to manufacture or produce in the most efficient manner. That would probably be rationalization. Today, it marks many institutions besides the factory and every modern political system, including so-called socialist systems. So even though Marx said that this particular path is related to the capitalist system only, now it is all pervasive. It marks many different institutions. So all of these institutions are kind of working together to set up a particular type of social order, which is a top-down approach, which is something that people are not able to resist. This trajectory arose from the problems of command over a disempowered and de-skilled labor force, but everywhere that masses are organized, the same pattern prevails. So what we are saying is that the origin may have lain somewhere else, but even today, wherever people are organized or they exist in organized sort of a setup, this trajectory is ongoing. This path where in the background certain institutions are trying to impose a social order, it is a continuous process. Then we are saying that technological design and development is shaped by this pattern as the material base of a distinctive social order. Now let's understand what's going on. Let's think of it as a grand scheme to organize society in a particular way. Now, it is not one person who's doing it, but certain institutions and organizations are coming together to establish a particular type of society or social order. Technology is one way in which we are trying to do this. That is what this line means. Technological design and development is shaped by this pattern as the material base. So, we would obviously need to have some sort of material tools or ways to implement a particular social order, right? Technology serves as one of those ways. Now we're pointing to another person. Marcuse would later point to a project as the basis of what he called rather confusingly technological rationality. Now when you read this, you should see that this is something similar to what Karl Marx was also saying. Marx was also attributing this downward path to the rationalization of production. Marcuse is also talking about technological rationality. Releasing technology from this project is a democratic political task. So, all of these thinkers believe that technology should not really serve as a tool to impose a particular social order, that it is the task of democracy to free technology from this sinister project. Now, we have to sum up this entire story in a few words. So, how do we do that? The argument in paragraph 2 is that this tendency towards this authoritarian social order, it characterizes many institutions and shapes technological development and design. Now, we move on to the third para. In accordance with this general line of thought, critical theory of technology regards technologies as an environment rather than a collection of tools. So when we think about technology, we would probably think internet, the mobile phone, the electric light bulb, but these are just tools. According to the critical theory of technology, we need to think of all of these things coming together as a particular environment that shapes us. That is what the next line is saying. We live today with and even within technologies that determine our way of life. Of course, we would know this to be true, right? The kind of technology that has come about in the last decade or even the last 2 decades has of course changed the way that we live. No one is going to debate that. But what is the problem with this change? That is what this critical theory of technology is trying to highlight in a way. Along with the constant pressures to build centers of power, many other social values and meanings are inscribed in technological design. So if you remember, we started off by saying that many powerful organizations are trying to impose some sort of an authoritarian social order. Now this project is something that also influences technological design. So the kind of technology that comes up is in a way the product of this tendency to impose a particular social order. Now let's think of something that we are all very familiar with and love, the iPhone. I was thinking about how the iPhone could actually impose a particular type of society on us. Could it even be possible? But when I thought about it, it in fact is true. Not just the iPhone, any sort of phone that allows you to remain connected with people 24 hours in a day is probably going to change the way that you live. So let's think about it. Now the phone has allowed us to access information. It has also allowed us to reach out and communicate with people who are very, very far away from us. But in doing so, what it also has done is that it starts setting expectations of how people should behave. So for example, since you have the ability to reach out and connect with people, now you're expected to be connected. So if you choose not to pick up your phone or if you choose not to reply to a message, then all of a sudden it's not the done thing. So in a way, this technology is imposing certain rules on us as to how we should behave or respond. So this is just a small example to illustrate how technology could change the way that we live. Now the word hermeneutics actually has to do with figuring out the meaning of something. So a hermeneutics of technology must make explicit the meanings implicit in the devices we use and the rituals they script. So every device has a certain underlying agenda is kind of what we are saying, and that technology expects us to behave in a particular way. That is what this sentence refers to, that each bit of technology scripts a particular ritual. It makes us do certain things. Social histories of technologies such as the bicycle, artificial lighting, or firearms have made important contributions to this type of analysis. So now, if we start looking at the social history of each type of technology, then we might be able to see more clearly how that technology has affected our society or how it has created certain behaviors that we are expected to follow. Critical theory of technology attempts to build a methodological approach on the lessons of these histories. So the argument in this paragraph can be summed up as this. The critical theory of technology regards technologies as an environment instead of tools. Now, this environment determines our way of life and attempts to understand the social values and meanings implicit in technological design. So, the critical theory of technology, as we stated earlier, is trying to understand how technology shapes the way that we live. Moving on to paragraph 4. As an environment, technologies shape their inhabitants. This is simply trying to say that since technology is seen as an environment that we live in, it is going to shape us as individuals. In this respect, they are comparable to laws and customs. Each of these institutions can be said to represent those who live under their sway through privileging certain dimensions of their human nature. Now, this line is in fact pretty complex. This technology is being compared to laws and customs. How are they comparable? Both of them assign importance to certain aspects of human nature. And if you believe that those aspects of human nature are in fact important, then you are also privileged by that kind of technology or law or custom. So let's think about it. Laws of property represent the interest in ownership and control. So if I in fact want to own property or land, then the laws of property are going to benefit me. Of course, I may not have anything to do with ownership and control, in which case the laws of property may not necessarily create any privileges. Customs such as parental authority represent the interest of childhood in safety and growth. So again, the notion of parental authority represents a certain aspect of human nature, certain beliefs that are supposedly the right beliefs to have. Similarly, the automobile represents its users insofar as they are interested in mobility. So, for those people who believe in being mobile, the automobile is going to be useful. So, each of these technologies is a representation of a particular aspect of human nature. It could be a particular desire or it could be a particular tendency. Interests such as these constitute the version of human nature sanctioned by society. Now, we have to understand that this kind of technology is allowed to develop only because these dimensions of human nature are allowed or sanctioned by society. For example, if we believe that humans are not to be mobile, then the automobile would never emerge. Or if we believe that parents should not exercise control over their children, then the notion of parental authority would not have flourished. So, how do we sum up the argument here? We are trying to say that technologies are in one respect comparable to laws and customs because both of these institutions place importance on certain aspects of human nature which are approved of or sanctioned by society. Now, this is the last paragraph. Not a very easy one to read, so let's be careful with it. This notion of representation does not imply an eternal human nature. So, we are saying that human nature is not permanent and therefore the representation may not be permanent either. The concept of human nature as non-identity in the Frankfurt School suggests an alternative. So, if human nature is not eternal, then how do we understand human nature? Something called the Frankfurt School provides an alternative explanation. On these terms, nature is what lies at the limit of history, at the point at which society loses the capacity to imprint its meanings on things and control them effectively. So, when we say nature lies at the limits of history, we need to think of it as a continuum. So, let's say that society is able to influence our behavior to a certain extent. But beyond that point, it's not really able to control our nature. It is at or beyond this point that human nature supposedly lies. Before that, whatever exists is nothing but society's imprinting on us or getting us to behave in ways that society wants us to behave. So that's not really human nature. That's not what we are necessarily born with. So this line is a little difficult to understand, but all that we need to get is that society is able to influence us to an extent, but beyond that it's not able to influence us. And it is in this beyond zone that human nature lies. The reference here is, of course, not to the nature of natural science, but to the lived nature in which we find ourselves and which we are. After that, I would preferably want to understand the story overall instead of getting lost in the details. What we're really trying to say is that society is able to influence us up to a point. But what happens after that? After that, the society may have to perhaps theoretically legitimize certain aspects of our human nature. Let's look at the last line. We can perhaps admit a less romantic conception in which those dimensions of human nature recognized by society are also granted theoretical legitimacy. So here we are saying that our nature could have certain less desirable aspects, but society grants them legitimacy. It approves of them, it allows them to continue. Now, the overall argument, without getting lost in the detail and the theory, is simply that, according to the Frankfurt School, human nature emerges out of a historical context in which certain less than ideal aspects of human nature are theoretically legitimized. So, to some extent, society can mold us, but beyond a point it cannot. And then society also decides that certain aspects of human nature could still be allowed to flourish or continue. Now, having read the passage, we should find ourselves lucky that the questions do not ask for a main idea, because it would be a little difficult to do that for a lot of us. But of course, I'm going to try my best to do the passage recap and sum up the overall idea for this passage. So in the first paragraph, we said that the critical theory of technology says that formal claims of human rights are gaining importance, but at the same time, in the background, there are certain things going on that we may not notice. These things are related to imposing an authoritarian social order, and there are certain organizations that are trying to lead this project. After that, we talked about the tendency towards this social order characterizes many institutions and shapes technological design and development. So, we talked about the fact that this tendency to impose a particular order also influences the kind of technology that comes up. Then we said that the critical theory of technology in fact regards technology as an environment, and since it's an environment, it determines our way of life. And this theory also tries to understand the social values and meanings implicit in technological design. What does a particular type of technology want us to do? How does it want us to behave? How does it specifically change our behavior, for example? Technologies are comparable to laws and customs because both these institutions place importance on certain aspects of human nature which are sanctioned by society. So just like laws and customs, technology also sanctions certain aspects of our behavior. It says that certain behavior is okay and certain behavior is not really desirable. Finally, we talked about the Frankfurt School, which said that nature actually emerges out of a historical context in which certain less than ideal aspects of human nature are legitimized. They are approved of by society. But all in all, we would have to sum up the viewpoint of the critical theory of technology. That would be our main idea. So this theory says that technology as an environment imposes a certain social order by privileging or assigning greater importance to certain aspects of human nature above others. This is one of the easier questions related to this passage. It's a pretty specific one. So what I did was that I looked at each option, I went back to the text when required and decided whether it agrees with the text or whether it does not agree with the text. So the first option says, paradoxically, the capitalist rationalization of production is a mark of so-called socialist systems as well. This is clearly given to us in paragraph 2. So Karl Marx attributed this path or trajectory to the capitalist system, but the same path or trajectory, the trajectory refers to this desire to impose a certain social order, it now marks other systems as well, including the socialist systems. So option 1 does not contradict, it in fact has support from the passage. So we eliminate it. We are looking for something that does not agree with the passage. Option 2 says masses are organized in patterns set by Foucault's prisons and Habermas's public sphere. Now, it does talk about Foucault and Habermas, but go back to the text. Does it say that in general, people are organized by the same patterns? Not necessarily. Let's look. Whether it be Foucault's prisons or Habermas's public sphere, the same pattern prevails. It's not trying to say that people everywhere are organized in patterns set by these two people. All that we're really trying to say is that wherever people are organized, whether in this way or that way, the same pattern prevails or repeats itself. So option 2 is not something we can necessarily derive from the text. And so this could be our answer. We retain it, we move on to option 3. The problems of command over a disempowered and de-skilled labor force gave rise to similar patterns of capitalist rationalization of production wherever masses were organized. This, in fact, is clearly given to us in the same text. This trajectory arose from the problems of command over a disempowered and de-skilled labor force. So, option 3 definitely does not contradict the passage. Option 4 says that Marx's understanding of the capitalist rationalization and Marcuse's understanding of a project share theoretical inclinations. In other words, they have certain similarities in theory. I would say that that in fact is true. Let's take a look. So if you remember, Marx attributed this trajectory to capitalist rationalization. What does Marcuse say? Marcuse would later point to a project as the basis of what he called technological rationality. So both of them are quoting some sort of rationality as a reason for society following a particular path or this project that is trying to impose a specific social order. That is one. Another similarity that I found between the two is that Marx on the whole attributed this path to a system of production. In other words, a particular materialistic system. And Marcuse is saying the same thing. Technological design and development is shaped by this pattern as the material base of a distinctive social order. So both of them are talking about some material base as the determinant of a particular type of social order. So for both of these reasons, I thought that option 4 is in fact true. Not just because both of them use the word rational. It's not that simple, although that could be a starting point. So option 4 does not contradict the passage. We eliminate it and we select 2 as our answer. All of the following claims can be inferred from the passage except. So let's take a look at each option and decide which one cannot be inferred. Option 1, analysis of technologies must engage with their social histories to be able to reveal their implicit and explicit meanings for us. So there is a part of the text that talks about the social history of technology, paragraph 3 specifically. Let's see. Social histories of the technologies such as the bicycle, artificial lighting, or firearms have made important contributions to this type of analysis. So yes, analysis of technology is definitely aided by looking at the social history of that technology. So option 1 can be inferred, which is why it's not our answer. We're looking for an exception, something that cannot be inferred. The critical theory of technology argues that as issues of human rights become more prominent, we lose sight of the ways in which social order becomes more authoritarian. This is clearly given to us in the very first paragraph, right here. Formal claims of human rights take center stage, while in the background, these organizations and institutions are imposing an authoritarian social order. So, option 2 definitely can be inferred. That's not our answer. Option 3 says, the significance of parental authority to children's safety does not therefore imply that parental authority is a permanent aspect of human nature. This has been given to us in the passage, although we need to look at paragraph 4 and 5. Paragraph 4 clearly says that these customs represent the interest of childhood in safety and growth. But right after that, paragraph 5 says that this notion of representation does not imply an eternal human nature. So, whatever is represented is definitely not an eternal representation of human nature, which is why option 3 will have to be eliminated. Option 4 says, technologies seek to privilege certain dimensions of human nature at a high cost to lived nature, we need to understand this option first. Are we saying that technologies assign importance to certain aspects while somehow taking away or maybe disadvantaging lived nature? That's not really stated in the passage. If you look at paragraph 5, it says very clearly that lived nature reveals itself as that which cannot be totally encompassed by the machinery of society. So, lived nature is not really something that society can control. Therefore, when option 4 says that technologies can create a cost to lived nature, that's not necessarily true. It does not necessarily create any disadvantages for it. So, option 4 cannot be inferred from the text, and that is why that should be our answer. Now, I felt this was again a simpler question as compared to some of the others. Which of the following best reflects the main argument of the fourth paragraph? So, obviously, we should take a look at the fourth paragraph, and after we have skimmed through it, we should come up with our own shadow answer. So, how would I sum up paragraph 4? I would probably say something like this: that technology as an environment is comparable to laws and customs. How so? Because both these institutions assign importance to certain dimensions of human nature. Keeping this in mind, I am now going to take a look at the options. So, technological environments privilege certain dimensions of human nature as effectively as laws and customs. Now, this comparison is not valid. We are not saying that technology privileges certain dimensions as effectively as laws and customs. Laws and customs are similar to technology in one respect. What respect? Because they are both institutions, but that's about it. It does not really say anything about the effectiveness of the two. So, option 1 should be eliminated. Option 2 says automobiles represent the interest in mobility. Now, this has been mentioned in paragraph 4, but this is definitely an example, so it cannot be the main argument. We know what the main argument is. It is the point that the author is trying to make. So, we eliminate option 2, though true, it is just an example. Option 3 says technology, laws and customs are not unlike each other if considered as institutions. This in fact is true. The reason that they are comparable is that they are both institutions that assign importance to certain aspects of human nature. So, I would retain option 3. Option 4 says technology, laws and customs are comparable but dissimilar phenomena. Now, the text over here does not really say that they are comparable but they are different. While we might be able to say that yes, but aren't they different? That is not given to us in the text. So, if it is not there, we should not reason beyond the scope of the passage, and so we eliminate option 4 because dissimilarity has not really been highlighted. So, our answer definitely is option 3. I thought it was a simple question, should have probably been gotten right. This question seems like it's a bit scary, but actually it's not. It's the same as any others. You look at the option, you compare that option to the text and decide whether it is in fact mentioned in the passage or whether it's not. So, let's take a look at the first option. Technologies form the environmental context and shape the contours of human society. Now, let's be careful. The same words may not be used in the passage, so to some extent we would have to infer or paraphrase. Is option 1 given? Yes, it is. In paragraph 3, it clearly says that technologies are to be seen as an environment, and because they are an environment, they determine our way of life. So yes, they do shape the contours of human society. And not only this, it also says at the very beginning that in the background, certain organizations are trying to impose a particular type of social order, and this project of imposing social order also extends to technology. So, on the whole, technology does influence society. So, option 1 could be one of the supporting arguments. Let's keep it, let's move on. It is not human nature but human culture that is represented by institutions such as law and custom. Now, that paragraph about law and custom does not really talk about human culture. It clearly says that technology, just like laws and customs, privilege certain dimensions of their human nature. So, I would say that option 2 is not really given to us as a supporting argument. But even if we disregard whether option 2 is true or false, is it really a supporting argument? Are we trying to differentiate between human culture and human nature? Not really. So, either way, option 2 should not be our answer. Option 3 says the romantic conception of nature referred to by the passage is one that requires theoretical legitimacy. This is clearly contradicted by the passage. If you look at paragraph 5, it says that it is the less romantic conception that is granted theoretical legitimacy. So, option 3 can definitely not be a supporting argument. It does not really have support in the passage. Option 4 says nature decides the point at which society loses its capacity to control history. This is an option that I did worry about a bit. But let's look at the text. It says nature is what lies at the limit of history. But does this mean that nature decides the point at which society loses its capacity to control? Not necessarily. I think that the meaning intended here in the text is very different from the meaning that is presented in option 4. And so, I decided that option 4 should probably not be the answer. We are pretty sure about option 1, and now we can confirm that option 1, since it is pretty clearly stated in the passage, is definitely one of the supporting arguments.